Plotting with his family's au pair to kill his wife and a stranger will get underway. Jury selection for the murder trial of Brendan Banfield is scheduled to begin any minute now. Investigators claim Banfield was involved in an affair with the au pair, Juliana Magalhaes, before the two then came up with a plan to get Banfield's wife, Christine, out of the picture. Authorities believe Banfield set up an account on a fetish website, using his wife's photos to lure a man to their home in order to make Christine's killing look like it was done by an intruder. When Joseph Ryan, a man Banfield allegedly met through that site, arrived at the home, Banfield fatally shot Ryan and stabbed his wife to death. That, according to prosecutors. The suspect has denied any involvement in Christine's murder. Magalhaes previously accepted a plea deal and admitted to manslaughter. Prior to accepting that deal, she spoke with police minutes after the incident took place. Take a look.
We're getting the ambulance here now.
My husband is downstairs.
Okay.
An au pair in Virginia had pleaded guilty to manslaughter after prosecutors alleged that she was a part of a ruse to help her employer and romantic partner kill his wife and another person.
And Brendan said, no, police, don't drop the knife. And he was saying, I'm going to kill her, I'm going to kill her. And I don't know, he started stabbing her. I think Brendan shot him, and he asked me help to shot him too because...
It's okay. You don't have to get it all out right now.
I never saw her before.
So the au pair was Juliana Perez Magalhaes, and she worked as a live-in nanny for a couple named Christine and Brendan Banfield to help raise their young daughter, who was about 4 years old at the time. She told police that she and Brendan Banfield, the husband, found an intruder in the primary bedroom of the home. And that intruder, who's since been identified as Joe Ryan, was stabbing Christine Banfield with a knife.
All right, thank you. They don't have any water. If you give me a couple minutes, I'm sure I can find someone that has some, okay?
Police arrived quickly thereafter, and they found the au pair, a wreck. She was hyperventilating. She was shaking. She was doing breathing exercises with detectives.
Okay. Let's take a nice deep breath, okay? Go. And out.
It's been nearly 2 years since these killings occurred, but in court, prosecutors are putting forward their theory. They're essentially saying that the au pair and Brendan Banfield lured Ryan to the house under the guise of a sexual encounter with Christine Banfield. And this is a belief that they say Juliana Perez Magalhaes, corroborated in a second interview she did with officials in late October.
I'm sorry.
It's okay. There you go. There you go. Okay, you're okay. You're safe here.
Yeah.
Now, in early September, Brendan Banfield was charged with aggravated murder of the deaths of both Ryan and his wife, Christine, and could potentially face a maximum sentence of life. And his trial is scheduled for February.
So there you have it. Yet again, a plot made for a movie, the stage now set. That was Magalhaes speaking to police minutes following the incident. She would later accept a plea deal and admitted to manslaughter. She is now the star witness in the case. That leads us to police officially charging Brendan with murder. Here's that press conference.
Ryan shook our entire community. Today, I'm pleased to announce that due to the hard work of police and prosecutors, the Commonwealth's Attorney's Office has secured an indictment against Brendan Banfield for the murder of his wife, Christine, and the murder of Mr. Ryan. Fairfax County police officers took Brendan Banfield into custody, and he's been brought to the same adult detention center where Juliana Perez Magalhaes has been since last year when she was arrested for the murder of Mr. Ryan. The great investigative work of the Fairfax County Police Department led us to new information, which was instrumental in securing today's indictment that charges Brendan Banfield with aggravated murder and the use of a firearm in the commission of a felony. I'm extremely grateful to FCPD for their continuing efforts in this case, as well as the efforts of Deputy Commonwealth's Attorneys Kelsey Gill and Eric Klingen, who've worked tirelessly with their counterparts in the Fairfax County Police Department. I know that you will have many questions, but I want to caution you that I can't speak much further on specifics, as it is a pending matter, and no one at this podium today wants to do anything that will risk prejudicing a future jury. But suffice to say, we're extremely pleased that we've been able to bring this indictment, as this case has weighed heavily not only on the minds of the Chief and I, but on the minds of our community. I hope that the family, friends, and loved ones of Christine and Joseph can find some solace in the knowledge that we're pursuing justice for them. Chief Davis?
Thank you, Mr. Toscano, and good evening. On February 24th, 2023, I stood in the middle of a cul-de-sac street in Fairfax County and described the deaths of 2 persons inside of a residential home. Now, 570 days later, we know the deaths of Joseph Ryan and Christine Banfield are both, in fact, murders. As you are aware, we charged Juliana Margalis with the murder of Joseph Ryan on October 13th, 2023. She remains in custody and awaits an upcoming trial. As described by Mr. Toscano, we are today announcing aggravated murder charges against Brendan Banfield for the murder of his wife, Christine Banfield, and Joseph Ryan. To be clear, Brendan Banfield, then 38, and Christine Banfield, then 37, were married and living in a single-family home with their then 4-year-old daughter. Also living in the house was the family au pair, Juliana Margalis, then 22 years old. Joseph Ryan, then 39 years old, lived in Springfield, Virginia at the time of his murder inside the Banfield home. Fairfax County police officers responded to a 911 call from within the home on February 24th, 2023. In an upstairs bedroom, we found Joseph Ryan deceased as a result of gunshot wounds and found Christine Banfield suffering from stab wounds. Christine was transported to a local hospital and pronounced dead. We recovered 2 firearms and a knife. We know Brendan Banfield and Juliana Margalis, the family au pair, were involved in a romantic relationship at the time of the murders. I will not describe our victim Joseph Ryan's relationship with anyone involved in the case at the moment because this investigation continues. And like any criminal investigation, our probing of the facts does not end when an arrest is made. This much is clear. We have evidence to now allege that Christine Banfield's life was unlawfully taken and Joseph Ryan's life was unlawfully taken. We are very limited, as Mr. Toscano stated, in providing additional details to your many inevitable questions this evening. We will not try this case in a news conference, nor will we compromise the integrity of our ongoing probe and investigation. The detectives, prosecutors, and victim services specialists who still work tirelessly on this case know who they are. To the Benson and Ryan families, a special thank you for your patience and trust. And now we will do our best to take some of your questions. Yes, sir.
Chief, could you illuminate at all, or to the Commonwealth State's Attorney, on the new information that you received?
We could probably, I'll give that to you.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
This is sliding.
That's sliding off.
All right, joining us now to break all of this down, Dante Mills, criminal attorney. So, Dante, obviously a lot of eyes on this court case, and one of the big questions happens to surround how long you expect this to actually last.
We don't know. We know the jury selection was one day, which I'll tell you is typical. Usually when I pick a jury, it's a day or two to go through the process. This case had some publicity, but it's not one of those cases where a lot of people are going to be excluding themselves from the jury. They're going to be interested to hear what happened here, and that's why they were able to get a jury so quickly. But they're going to have to go through a lot of evidence. I think this case may last a week or two because there's a lot of witnesses that are going to have to come forward because you have two completely different stories. You have the au pair saying this was a setup. She took a plea deal and said she was a part of that setup because they were in a new relationship and wanted to get rid of the wife. The husband is saying, I had nothing to do with this. The au pair is lying. Everybody else is lying. And I can prove it. So it's going to be a battle that's going to take some time.
As an attorney, though, and let's say you're representing the defendant in this case, dear God, what evidence do you have to bring forward in order to make sure that your client walks away scot-free?
It's tough because whenever you have a cooperating witness, who essentially what the au pair is, she said she was a part of this crime and she admitted that she was a part of it and said that he was too. That makes it difficult because you have someone who was a part of the crime saying this crime happened. His defense is she's lying. She was pressured by the prosecutors and they wanted to bring a quick end to this. It was so much hoopla around it. They wanted to show that they can close out this investigation, so they kind of moved the evidence to fit what they wanted the outcome to be. That's what he's saying. And he's saying there's evidence out there. For example, the other male, the male that was killed, he was lured there from a site where people connect for sexual pleasure.
Sure.
Right? And he's saying there's proof that his wife was actually the one who was contacting him on the computer. He said there's no evidence that either he or the au pair, that the husband or the au pair used the computer to lure the guy there. If that's the case, then maybe he's right? If they didn't lure the guy there, then how did they know the guy would be there so they can plan this elaborate scheme to set up this murder scene? So there's things in play that will cause or could cause some doubt if those facts play out and that testimony comes out.
This definitely has a script made for a movie.
Absolutely.
I guarantee you there will be a movie made about this. Will that impede in any way, form, or fashion with regard to how this trial carries out? And what I'm bringing up, I'm thinking about the jury, and perhaps, I would assume at some point they're going to get a chance to go home, but everybody is watching this, and you go to the grocery store, folks are going to be talking about this.
They're going to be talking about it because it's some salacious details. The au pair and the husband went on vacation to New York 6 months prior. They had, pictures of them showing that they were intimate with each other and things like that. It's some made-for-TV moments that's going to be here. The jury's job is going to be to block out kind of the flashing lights and say, at the end of the day, this seems salacious. It seems like, the au pair and the husband wanted to be together, so they set this up. But is there enough evidence to prove it beyond a reasonable doubt? Our jury system works because the jury looks past all of that glitz and glamour and looks at the facts and the law and says, was this case proven beyond a reasonable doubt? If not, they can't convict him. They can't. But if it is, if the prosecution proved this case beyond a reasonable doubt, that this was a setup by the husband and the au pair to get rid of the wife, then the jury must decide that he's guilty, and that's what it should come down to.
By the way, this case for me pulls at the heartstrings, if you will, because I'm thinking about the child that happens to be involved in this as well.
Not only that, but there was the daughter in the house when this happened, in the basement. Imagine being in the home when your mother is killed and people saying that your father is the one who did it. That has to be very traumatic. And also, if this is the case, if what the prosecution is saying is true, you have someone who was just an innocent bystander. He had nothing to do with this. He was lured into this situation so it can be set up to look like he killed the wife, and he was killed himself. And he had nothing to do with this. So there's a lot of victims here, not just the people who lost their lives, but the families around it, because they're impacted. There can be children who mother was killed and father committed the murder. Imagine growing up with that your whole life. So there's a lot at stake here, and I want the jury to really listen in, hone in, so that they can get it right, because it's going to be an important decision.
We'll end with this, and that is, obviously, as you stated, a lot of eyes on this court case. But correct me if I'm wrong, typically within the court of law, you revert back to old cases or cases where you have seen a judge rule this way or that way. There's so much going on with this. What case can you revert back to say, you know what, perhaps I need to rule in this manner because this happened before?
Well, you'd be surprised. There's nothing new under the sun.
Really?
And with the law, we've seen it all. We've seen it all. Yes, this case seems like it's 1 in a million, but it's not. especially when you talk about relationships and people who connect and feel like they're trapped with their spouse and they want to get out of it. And for some bizarre reason, they think the only way to do that is to kill their spouse. I mean, think of like Scott Peterson and things like names that we know where there was a husband and wife and then a new relationship and the spouse was killed. And the jury has to determine if the spouse actually committed that murder. It's happened time and time again, unfortunately. I don't know why people just don't get a divorce.
Yeah.
It seems like it's a much cleaner way to get out of a situation. But I think the law is well prepared to handle this. This judge is very bright and prepared to handle this. And I think the jury, hopefully, will really hone in and they'll be prepared to handle this as well, and we'll get the right decision.
Obviously, a lot to unpack here, and we'll continue to do that throughout the day. Dante Mills joining us. Always a pleasure to see you.
Thank you.
So that leads us to where we are now. Jury selection now underway at the Fairfax County Courthouse. That's where we find our very own Bob Barnard.
Hey there, good morning, Guy and folks. Here at the Fairfax County Courthouse, where jury selection is beginning this hour, the 10 o'clock hour. The goal is to seat 12 jurors by the end of the day because they're planning on opening arguments tomorrow in this case. There will be a camera in the courtroom for this trial, very unusual, but that won't start until tomorrow. So this whole jury selection process will just be observed by people like myself, reporting back on whether, and I'm sure they will, be able to get 12 jurors who know nothing about this case, or if they do, have not already formed an opinion. That should be easy. One quick anecdote. Back in the day, there was this terrible murder at the Lululemon store in Bethesda, on Bethesda Road. Made like world headlines. It was, all over the news. And after the trial, I had a chance to speak to one of the jurors who was from the Gaithersburg area. And I asked him, had you not heard about this case? And he said no. And that he was kind of, in tune with current events and what was going on, and had not even heard about the Lululemon trial or the Lululemon murder, and was able to serve as a juror on at that trial for that case. So I would imagine there'll probably be plenty of people here in Fairfax County who not heard about this sensational murder case. And so I'm expecting they will probably seat a jury by the end of the day, and the trial will kick off tomorrow with opening arguments. And we'll be here every step of the way, guys. My colleague Melanie Alnwick in the morning. I'll be here during the day, and we'll be dropping podcast episodes every evening. And so stick with us. Nowhere else to follow this than right here on your Fox Local app, on our Fox 5 YouTube and TikTok pages, guys.
Yet again, Bob Barnard reporting outside of the Fairfax County Courthouse. So, what evidence could we see first, and how long could the trial last? We'll ask those questions and so much more with attorney Michelle Thomas. She joins us next on Deadly Desire. Welcome back to Deadly Desire. I'm your host, Guy Lambert. Thank you so much for joining us on the Fox Local app, our YouTube page, and TikTok. It's all things Brendan Banfield, accused of not only murder, but double murder at that. Joining us now to discuss this and so much more is Michelle Thomas, D.C. trial attorney. It is always good to see you. Welcome to the show. And I got to tell you, get your popcorn ready, Michelle, because this is unlike anything that I have ever seen before. We know the facts. We know the basis, if you will. It's been laid out. And I'm just curious. We know that jury selection will get underway today, and it's only supposed to last one day. It's the million-dollar question, Michelle, for those of us who are not familiar, and that is, why?
Well, good morning, and thanks so much for having me. Great to be with you. So, yeah, today we're focused on jury selection. And what we're going to hear from the lawyers is this process called voir dire, where they will be questioning potential jurors, trying to identify, detect any implicit or explicit biases, whether any of the jurors cannot make a fair and impartial decision, whether they've been exposed to media news coverage, and which may influence their ability to hear the facts and the evidence and weigh it fairly. So that's what the process is. But in Fairfax County, they run a very efficient system, and so I believe that the court will try to limit the jury selection to one day, though certainly it could go over if necessary. So, Michelle, in all fairness, I live outside of Fairfax County. I grew up in Fairfax County. I frequent that county a lot. I've heard about this for quite some time. How can one live within that county and not be familiar with this case? Isn't it nearly impossible? That's the million-dollar question, because of the fact that there's so much media coverage around this case. And let's be honest, you grew up there. This is a big deal for Fairfax County. We don't see this type of crime very often. And so people are very invested. The community is very invested. But the key is going to be whether, even if you're familiar with the facts of the case, whether you can still be impartial and weigh the evidence as presented and limit your analysis of the evidence to what is presented at trial. And that's what the lawyers are going to be focused on, and then seeking to strike those jurors who indicate they cannot be impartial and fair in their judgment of this case. Michelle, as you and I both stated, this is a big deal, which leads me to my next question. With it being such a big deal, how is the judge really expected to manage the courtroom procedure? Oh, very well. I believe we may have the same judge that presided over the Amber Heard, Johnny Depp trial, but it's a very efficient process in Fairfax. I've been practicing there more than 20 years. And so the court, they've already had preliminary motions. Most likely they've ruled on a lot of the issues that could have come up regarding evidence admissibility and any other types of process or procedural issues. And so the judge is going to make sure that people stick to their time, any time constraints, and make sure that the courtroom remains orderly and progresses efficiently so that the trial can conclude within about 4 weeks is the estimated time frame. Yeah. And so with that being said, I must ask, and that was one of the teases, if you will, that I made mention of prior to us going to break. So you are stating that it should last, or will probably last, in all actuality, some 4 weeks. Can I pose the question why? And the reason why I'm asking that is, for example, how long will the prosecution argue? How long will the defense argue? What happens thereafter? Sure. So we're going to expect to hear from the prosecution a lot of witnesses regarding the forensics, regarding the crime scene and laying that out. They did find some of the weapons at the crime scene. So a firearm was found. I believe 2 knives were found. And so they have to methodically present witnesses that can introduce that evidence, talk about the chain of custody for the various pieces of evidence. We're also going to hear most likely from the prior co-defendant, who is the au pair in this sort of love triangle. She will likely testify, and there's going to be an extensive cross-examination there. There may be some experts who testify as well. So when you put all the pieces together, there's going to be a lot of witnesses presented, a lot of extensive cross-examination, and then redirect, and then also possibly a rebuttal case. So by the time you take all those steps, you're looking at about 4 weeks. Okay, so I want to bring Magalise back up yet again, the au pair, if you will. And we know that she has a plea deal and admitted to manslaughter. Her testimony, will that change, or could it change anything that's already been agreed upon? Well, in terms of her plea deal, it's unlikely to change her plea deal. But when she does testify, the defense is going to attack her credibility extremely, because of the fact that they're going to say she's making this storyline up, pointing the finger at the defendant here because she was able to get a deal and plead to a lesser charge of involuntary manslaughter. So her credibility is going to be on the line. There's prior inconsistencies and lies that she told at the beginning of this case. So that's going to be a major issue for the defense in terms of this particular witness.
And then there is the 4-year-old child, in this case, the 4-year-old daughter of both Christine and Brendan, who happened to be in the basement, allegedly, at the time where this crime was committed. I got to tell you, Michelle, I can only imagine being a part of that jury and hearing that. Do you think that the prosecution will play on that to really pull at the heartstrings to say, how could something like this happen with your daughter inside the home?
Yeah, that's a really tragic component of this case. However, as I mentioned, they had an extensive preliminary hearing about the admissibility of a forensic interview that the investigators did with the child. And so the court already ruled that interview would be excluded from this trial. So it's not going to have the impact that the prosecutors were hoping, because the jury's not going to hear from the child herself who was in the home, and they're not going to hear a lot of those details because that was addressed prior to the commencement of this trial.
All right, so all eyes yet again on the Fairfax County courtroom, or courthouse, I should say, where any minute now we are expecting jury selection to get underway. We know our very own Bob Barnard is there. At the end of this trial, obviously, we'll hear a verdict. And my question to you, as we have about 3 minutes left, are what are the potential sentences that Mr. Banfield faces if convicted and found guilty?
Well, he's the 4 charges of this aggravated murder. He's looking at life. He's looking at spending the rest of his life in jail. And so that's why his defense is going to focus on the fact that there was not an eyewitness, allegedly, the fact that there may be challenges to some of the forensic evidence, and just trying to create this reasonable doubt. But if he is convicted, he certainly will likely spend the rest of his life in jail. Other alternatives is that he could be acquitted because of reasonable doubt, or there could be a hung jury at the end.
Yeah, Michelle, I'm not sure if you saw my interview with Dante Mills earlier, a fellow attorney, colleague, if you will. But have you ever seen anything of the like? And I know I keep on saying it's made for a movie, but yet again, I scoured and looked throughout the history and haven't seen anything. And I'm curious, have you?
You know, it does happen where there are these love triangles that ultimately result in the death of one or more persons. And so I do think that we have seen cases where there is sort of this love triangle involved, and someone's trying to set up or frame someone else and make it seem as though there's a third party culprit here. So that concept has happened before. Now, have we seen that in Fairfax County? Not very often, or certainly not to my recollection.
Yeah, yet again, I'll say it one more time. Made for a movie, and I'm pretty sure we'll see that movie sometime in the near future. We have been joined by Michelle Thomas, D.C. trial attorney, kind enough to join us on Deadly Desire. We truly appreciate your time.
Thank you for having me.
All right, folks. So obviously we will continue to keep a close eye on this throughout the day. Our very own Bob Barnard is at the courthouse. Jury selection now underway. Is expected to begin in the 10 o'clock hour. And we expect to get a report from Bob later on this afternoon on the live zone beginning in the 12 noon hour. We will also have extensive coverage throughout the entire trial. As you heard Michelle make mention of, this will likely last for some, not 1, not 2, not 3, but count them, 4 weeks in total, during which each and every morning right here on Fox Local, YouTube, and the TikTok page, we'll be able to bring you the latest as we discuss and entertain and argue all things with regard to Mr. Brendan Banfield, yet again accused of not only murder, but double murder in a love triangle unlike any other.